Up with all of the food recalls. 2025 has not been a good year for food and beverages.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something you do every single week, grocery shopping. And we're asking a really important question. How safe is the food on your grocery store shelves? You probably think, yeah, it's pretty safe, right? Well, the numbers, they tell a different and honestly, a more complicated story. Get this. The U.S. government says that 1 in every 6 Americans gets sick from contaminated food. Every single year. And that leads to about 3,000 deaths. It's a huge number. And how about this one? 58 million pounds. That is the staggering weight of corn dogs and sausages recalled by just one company in 2025. And you know why? All because they might have had pieces of wood in them. Wood! And then there's the human cost. 6 deaths. That's how many people died from a single listeria outbreak that was linked to prepared pasta meals. Okay, so let's dive into this. We're going to start with the kind of threat you can't even see. Yeah, our first stop is the world of microbiological contaminants. We're talking about those invisible bacteria that can turn a totally normal meal into a really serious and sometimes deadly threat. So let's take a look at a really devastating outbreak of listeria. The CDC investigators, they were basically detectives on this case for more than a year, trying to piece together all these clues to figure out where this deadly infection was even coming from. And as you can see, this was a slow burn. The first illness popped up way back in August of 2024. Then, months later, they finally find a clue in some chicken fettuccine Alfredo. But the outbreak just keeps growing. With cases popping up all over the country over so many months, you can imagine how incredibly hard it was to find the one single source. And this is where you really see the human impact behind the numbers. We're talking about 27 people across 18 states. The victims ranged in age from just 4 years old all the way to 92. It just shows how vulnerable we all are. And look at this. Out of 26 people they had data for, 25 of them ended up in the hospital. That is how serious this was. So what was the culprit? It was contaminated pasta from a single supplier. That pasta ended up in prepared meals sold at huge retailers like Walmart and Kroger. And that's the scary part, right? Just one contaminated ingredient can create this massive, tragic ripple effect through the entire food supply chain. Okay, so that's the invisible enemy. But let's switch gears and talk about a different kind of threat. This one is less about biology and more about, well, stuff that's just not supposed to be in your food. Yeah, like wood in your corn dogs. Seriously. We're talking about wood fragments found in the batter, which led to that insane recall of 58 million pounds we mentioned earlier. And it is not just wood. How about metal in your jerky? Imagine that, finding little pieces of metal wire in your snack. That was a real recall, and it affected over 2 million pounds of jerky. And then there's plastic. Almost 731,000 pounds of frozen hash brown patties had to be pulled from restaurants because they had bits of plastic mixed in. Yikes. But sometimes the contaminant is something you would never in a million years expect, like radioactivity. And that brings us to maybe the most shocking case of 2025, which involved frozen shrimp, all the way from Indonesia. This right here, this official alert, this really shows you how global our food supply is. The shrimp was contaminated with something called cesium-137. That's a radioactive isotope. Basically a man-made atom that gives off radiation. Definitely not something you want on your dinner plate. This led to a huge recall of over 1.28 million pounds across the entire U.S. And get this, contamination doesn't always happen when the food is being made. Take the Gold Star recall. This was a massive one. Hundreds of products from brands you know and love, Coke, Pepsi, Hershey's, Kellogg's, all recalled. Why? Because the warehouse where they were being stored was contaminated by rodents and birds. That meant a potential salmonella risk for all of it. Okay, so with all these crazy dangers lurking out there, you'd think there's a system in place to protect us, right? Well, there is, and here's how it's supposed to work.
So, on paper, it looks pretty straightforward. Step 1, someone finds a problem. Step 2, they tell the public. Step 3, stores pull it off the shelves. Step 4, they figure out what went wrong so it doesn't happen again. It's a clear, logical process designed to get dangerous food out of our hands, fast. But in the real world, the system can and does fail. And those gaps between finding the problem and actually getting the food off the shelf can have devastating consequences.
Just listen to this quote from food safety lawyer Bill Marler. He's talking about a father whose child got sick, and that father found the recalled infant formula still for sale on a grocery store's shelf. This was months after the recall was announced, and months after the store had been warned, repeatedly. This is exactly where the system completely breaks down. So look, I know this all sounds really overwhelming and maybe a little scary, but the goal here isn't to make you afraid to eat. It's to empower you. So what can you actually do about it? The most important thing is to be proactive. First, stay informed. You can check official websites like recalls.gov. Second, if you hear about a recall, actually check your pantry. Look for the matching lot codes, the UPCs, all that stuff. Third, and this is crucial, if you have a recalled product, don't eat it. Don't even think about it. Just throw it away or take it back for a refund. And finally, if you do get sick and you think it's from something you ate, call your doctor and report it to your local health department. A few simple checks can honestly make all the difference. You know, our food system is more global and more complex than ever before. But when it really comes down to the food on your plate, who's ultimately responsible for your safety? It's a big question, and it's definitely something to think about the next time you're walking down that grocery aisle. Thanks for joining us for this.
They say natural flavors, natural where? From what planet? Why is my milk lasting 3 months? What is it, embalmed? I opened a juice bottle today and it's got more chemicals than my perm.